Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson, and welcome to Construction Business Management. In this series, we're looking at how to start and run a construction business. And in this particular video, we're looking at a cash flow case. In the previous videos on financial statements, we reviewed the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. So in this case, we're going to actually look at a case study of a project and how cash flow comes in and out of a project, and then we can think and contextualize that from the perspective of we have a number of projects and we have to ensure that we have ample cash available so that we can pay our trades, our employees, etc. And what does it really mean, cash flow? So we'll start off again with a little bit of a review on that, make sure that people have a good understanding of it. So really the importance of cash flow will be covered, the consequences of having negative cash flow, and what we have to do to better prepare ourselves and also to minimize that. And if you are a trade partner, what is your viewpoint on this? And if you're a consultant or client, what is your viewpoint? So there's a lot of different perspectives to take when we think about cash flow, because it's very centric on whoever the person is that you're looking at or whatever their business is that you're looking at, because it affects everybody. We'll also talk about retainage and lien legislation that requires 10% holdbacks, and that places, again, another stress on trying to get to a positive cash flow. So when we think about cash flow, it really is the difference between the money that is flowing into the business and the money that is flowing out of the business. And if you're looking at the sources here, generally you have fewer sources of it coming in and multiple sources of it going out. Well, just think of any construction business. You have so many suppliers, so many trades, so many employees, and then you have a few clients where the money is actually coming in from based on progress draws, where you've invoiced for a certain amount of work to be drawn from. And so it's that balance there that you're trying to achieve. Now, if you don't achieve a pretty good balance here, it can definitely lead you to bankruptcy. If you can't pay people, that will put you in a very, very negative position. And if we think about a perfect world scenario, from the different perspectives, I think it helps when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, just sort of like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It always said, put yourself in the other person's shoes and try to view it from their situation. Well, if we think about a perfect world scenario, if you're the client, the perfect world is I don't pay you until you're done, because I'm not too sure, about the quality. I'm not too sure if you're going to finish this perspective. So from their perspective, perfect world is they don't pay you till you're done. Perfect world from the general contractor's perspective is I get paid on the first day or before we start. Then I know I'm going to get paid. I don't have to worry about my client going bankrupt or deciding they don't want to pay me. I've just gotten rid of that whole risk scenario. Now, if you want to look at the real world is somewhere in the middle between the perfect world for a client and the perfect world for a contractor. And part of that depends on your ability to negotiate, the schedule of values that you've laid out at the beginning, the breakdown of the payments that you expect to get when you hit certain milestones, and also determining what percentage of work is complete of those amounts if you're going to be drawing, say, monthly from that. Also, you have to think about it from the subcontractor or sub-trades, trade partner's perspective. Well, I'm the GC, so a perfect world for me would be I wait to pay my sub-trades as long as possible, right? Then I at least am protecting my interests somewhat in case the client doesn't pay me. From the sub-trades perspective, they're back to being like you were. Right? They don't know if they don't trust that you're going to pay them. How do they know that? Maybe you're going to go bankrupt. Maybe you're going to decide you don't want to pay them for some particular reason, and there's a large sum outstanding. That could drive them into bankruptcy. And it pretty much goes down the food chain that way, this back and forth aspect and negotiation. So in a perfect world, you would negotiate as long a terms that's acceptable to the particular trades in your contracts as possible. Now, there may even be government legislation that has certain requirements in certain jurisdictions. Like in the province of Ontario, we have the Construction Act, which is relatively new process where you're supposed to be paid within 30 days of invoicing. And part of that came out of everybody taking longer and longer to pay people. It went from, when I was a contractor, busy at things, it was around 30 days. Then it went to 45 days. Then it went to 60 days. And it seemed like it was getting longer. Some were even extending it out almost 90 days, which is a very long time to wait for your money because you have to pay people. So the construction industry is kind of, and it depends your jurisdiction, but it's kind of raft with this dichotomies of interests that plays about. So you definitely want to be cognizant of cash flow. You want to have a good understanding of your clients, the bureaucracies that are involved. Sometimes it's not that the client's being malicious in any way. It's just that they have a fairly thick bureaucracy that it takes time for all of the signatures to be signed before the check is released. That happens when you deal with big organizations. We used to always find that took a long time when we dealt with government organizations. Takes a lot of steps and takes a lot of time before you get paid. You know what we used to do? We used to put a premium on the pricing so that any interest that we would have to pay for financing would be covered. And most people bidding on those types of jobs kind of had that premium built into it, so it was kind of okay. It's hard though if you have somebody that's undercutting the other prices when you're bidding on the lowest bid. You're always trying to have your prices as tight as possible. And then if you're putting premiums to cover yourself of risk, then that might mean you don't get those projects. So there's all these things that come in to try to balance out. But certainly with your clients, you want to try to negotiate as best terms as possible. With your trades and your suppliers, the same thing holds true, to try to reduce your risk. Now, as this point over here discusses, delaying payment in an unscrupulous manner, that's not a good thing. So if you've negotiated a certain period of time, subcontractor expects to get paid now, and you don't, that's not a good thing. It could put them in a very precarious position. They may not be able to pay their suppliers or employees, and it could put them out of business. And they're not going to want to work for you anymore. They're not going to trust you. Or if they do work for you, they're going to put a very large premium on it. And if they're all your trades are putting premiums on you being able to pay them, then your prices go up, and then you may not get as much work. So there is that aspect. But if you knowingly negotiate these payment terms and they understand that, then it's reasonable. So good communication that way, trying to understand how your payments are going to work is very important, and understanding that some clients will be different than other clients regarding payments go. And I've dealt with lots of different things in industry this way. I even had one client, private industry client. They put all their money in this term investment that they had, and it was going to take 90 days. And they told me, oh, I just put my money in this term investment. Do you mind waiting the 90 days? And what do you think I'm going to say? I'm not happy with that situation. They think that I can wait 90 days while they make a good return on their money, and meanwhile I finance this project. So sometimes you have to be pretty clear about things with clients when they kind of think about themselves first before they think about you. You've got to have a good understanding there. And I was pretty clear about it. Well, we're going to have to stop and we're going to have to go work on other projects. And then at the end of the 90 days, when we get paid up to this point, then we'll come back and we'll continue to work on that. They didn't like that either because they wanted the work done. So of course, then they found a way to get the money. But you run into all kinds of things, and you wouldn't think that somebody would think that way, but I'm telling you, very often you do run into those cases. So you got a pretty big dichotomy of different things that occur. Now we also have requirements, and again, it depends your jurisdiction, your country, etc., where you've got holdback requirements with lien legislations. North America is pretty common with 10% holdback requirements, and what that is, it's without getting too deep into the lien legislation requirements, it's to protect different trades and contractors that are working in the construction sector, that they actually get paid. So in other words, the client would hold back 10% from the contractor to the end of the project. And there's different requirements of so many days to hold back after the work is completed to give people time if they need to place a lien on the property. A lien prevents somebody from selling the property during that time period. And that trust is held there to cover, hopefully, those amounts that are in dispute. And those are legal requirements that are supposed to be done in construction projects. So that puts you, if you're the contractor and you just build for $2 million or $200,000, let's say, there's 10% holdback. That would be $20,000. That could be held back for a long period of time while you work on that project. Now, you can basically do the same thing when your trade invoices you. You can hold 10% back from them, generally speaking, and how lien legislation works. And it kind of goes down the food chain that way. So it is kind of a complex web that is required for those purposes, because maybe your subtrade has another subtrade that they didn't pay, so they would be able to file a lien in that case. So those are protections that are put in place, but it does somewhat make your cash flow situation more complex as well, because if you don't consider that and you don't fully hold back what you're supposed to hold back from your subtrades, you're for sure going to be in a negative position. And it's always difficult to get into a positive position for those reasons. So I've got this little cash flow example case that I thought I'd run through just to make sure everybody pictures it. And like I said, in one of the previous videos, I went through cash flow and what a cash flow statement looks like for the company and how you've got to deal with the money that's coming in and the money that's going out and how it transfers month to month. That's for all of your projects. So right now we're going to zoom in and look at one project. And if you didn't see those, again, I'll have it in the descriptions, or if you click subscribe and look under the playlist, Construction Business Management, you should be able to see the listing of all the previous videos in this course. If you click notifications, you'll see any of the upcoming ones as well. So the cash flow example is for a strip mall, and we have a strip mall that's being constructed, and the contractor has developed a cash flow statement, and the construction time period is expected to be 10 months. So they've projected out for 10 months how the cash flow will flow for this particular strip mall. And it's based on end of month figures that measure the positive cash inflows from the client and the negative cash outflows to pay the GC's expenses. So if we take a look, we've got cash flow laid out, and there's our January to end of October amounts. So when we started working in January and through that month, by the end of the month, client payments to the contractor, $300, and this would be in hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that'd be $300,000 coming in, and payments to the subcontractors, $375. So we had, if you just look at these two lines, we had more money going out than was coming in. And if we do cumulative is the total for the project, then it will add up from month to month to month, the inflows and the outflows. So you can see month to month to month how it's growing, and you can also see net cumulative, if it's positive or negative. So in this particular example, I've purposely done it that it will be somewhat negative through the project, just so that we can start thinking about things that we could perhaps do in advance of getting into it to try to mitigate some of it. We have, so that's minus 75,000 in the first month. In the second month, again, we've got 350. We've got 350 coming in, a little bit better, and 375 going out, but we're still negative by another 25,000. So if we take the difference between this and that, now we're up to 100,000. So we've had total 300 plus 350,000 coming in, so that's 650 cumulative. And we've had 375 and 375 going out, so that's 750 cumulative. So you're minus 100,000. So this number here, this 500 now in the next month, 550. So again, it's still growing. is making this the cumulative. We're adding 650 plus 500, that gives us 1,150,000. 750 plus 550, that gives us 1,300,000, and the difference between these two is 150. So you see it starts to grow from 75 month to month, and it keeps growing, and it reaches a peak point in this period, and then it starts to decline, and it actually turns positive near the end. So you can kind of look at this graph and see this bar chart and see the differences. So outgoing is in red and incoming is in blue. Kind of makes sense. And you start to see that every month there's more going out, but this isn't showing you the cumulative amounts, but you do see that there all of a sudden there does seem to be quite large amounts coming in. And if I'm to look at this at the end, this does look like it's going to be a profitable project, right? So I've got $325,000 at the end, so it does mean that it's going to be a profitable project. If it's negative still at the end, it's a real dud of a project. Nevertheless, we might want to think, well, are there ways that we can mitigate some of that? So you can kind of visually see it definitely when you look at it cumulatively. You can see, okay, so it goes down negative, but then it starts to bounce upward. And at a certain point at the end of the project, it really bounces upward. Well, part of that would be the release of the holdback amounts. Depending how well you negotiated with your subtrades, for sure the client is releasing the holdback amounts once you're closing out the project and the time period has expired, generally 45 days after completion. So after substantial completion. So we can see the negative amounts building up through here, and it peaks out at minus 300, and then it gets to be less. Right? So it peaks out, and this is cumulative. So this is important. It's cumulative. So at our worst is in this time period here. So at our worst negative amounts, it's during this time period here. And that's significant because you would want to make sure that at the very least, if you can't correct any of this, you would want to make sure of what? What would you say from running a business perspective? Think about it. You definitely want to make sure that you have enough liquidity that you will have cash available or lines of credit available or financing available that would take you through these rough spots where you have in excess of $200,000 owing. So that's giving you a pretty good indicator there that there's a large amount going out. You'd want to make sure well in advance of getting there, you have that in place. You don't want to get there and find out there's a problem. So it really indicates that there's a number of months that you're going to have negative cash flow, and it doesn't return till positive till the end of the project, but it is a good thing. So this is not a dud of a project as long as it's meeting your profit projections of what you are driving for, and it's covering your overhead, as we talked about with markup when we take our direct costs and we multiply it by that. As long as overall we're meeting those targets, this is not a dud of a project. So we don't want to not do it because we're going to have potentially negative cash flow at certain points. But at the same time, do we want to pay all this interest that we would have to on financing? Maybe we do have to pay it. Maybe we've covered that in the costs here, and that we understand. But maybe we don't. So we want to take a look and think about that. And we have to also remember this is one project. So we're talking about construction business management in this course. It's not just one project. Maybe you've got 5 projects on the go. How is this lining up? Maybe you've got all of them that they're going to be maxing out around the same time. So it's not only this project, it's other ones. That could be a problem. Or on the other hand, maybe you got other projects that are turning to the positive where you're going to have extra cash that's going to help you out. So it is about timing, and it is about the macro view, not just the micro view of one project. It's more about the macro view about how all your projects are lining up over a period of time. That's where the cash flow statement comes in that we were discussing in one of the previous videos on the financial statements. So we look at this, the GC will need to ensure that they have reserves, as I mentioned. The GC will need to place this project in context of the other projects, as I mentioned. Overall, the project is indicating net cash inflow, which is positive, so that's good. We want to be able to review the information in different forms so that we can better visualize what's going on. That's why it's helpful to look at it this way, to have this information in place. And again, it's just in a spreadsheet. That way, there's other tools that you can use. You could use Microsoft Project Cost Loading, your schedules to show when the money is going out, and then you could calculate what you're going to have coming in during those periods. That would be one way. You could have some pretty good accounting software that would be able to do those forecasts for you as well. So if the payment requirements, if they've not yet been firmly enshrined, the contract's not signed and the schedule value is not finalized, maybe you could negotiate better terms with both the client as far as payments. Often if you shorten the payment requirements, then that makes it more, you're not waiting as long in between periods. So that gives you a better chance of paying out to subcontractors and suppliers. So it's every 2 weeks instead of every month, as an example, would be a positive benefit that way. Same thing with your sub-trades. Again, if you can negotiate longer payment terms, that's also helpful from that perspective, and suppliers as well. Make sure that you are billing in a very timely fashion. Do not miss billing dates just because you're busy working in the project. You got to work on the business if you want to be successful. And the forecasts that you're making here are only as good as your ability to be able to lay out and develop a really good schedule in advance for the work. And that's very important, to be able to develop an excellent schedule so that you can better manage your funds and, of course, better time your work and your employees and better measure your productivity rates so that you have good understanding how well you're doing with your estimates on the core part of your business. So the forecasts are only as good as the information derived from the estimates, the baseline schedule, and contract payment schedule dates. Garbage in, garbage out. So what are some good practices that things to think about regarding cash flow? What are some good practices that you've seen regarding cash flow and billings? Think of contractors that you've worked with and how well they've billed. So you might have some sub-trades and you see that as soon as they get done, they have it billed. That's a very good practice. Like when they're on and they can make their billings, they do it right away. There's no delay on that. And poor practices are where you let it slide and you let 2-3 weeks go by before you actually invoice. That is a waste because you could have had that money sooner. People are not going to rush to pay you when you're late in providing the invoice. So you got to keep that in mind. That are you invoicing on in a timely basis or on a timely basis? It's interesting too. If you Google cash flow, I just did this before I put this together, and construction business failures, you'll see over 57 million results. There's a lot of failures in the construction industry due to problems with cash flow, due to problems with collecting, due to problems with having too large an amount of money outstanding. And having a positive cash flow is a really big deal. I've mentioned this story before in one of my other videos, but I think it's worth saying again. I had a friend that was a contractor. I knew him for many years from my involvement with our Building Industry and Land Development Association. He was a member there, very good guy, ran a really good business, but somehow he had this client that all of a sudden decided they weren't happy with the work, something of that nature. I can't foresee that he did anything major wrong because I just knew how he ran things, but he had a client. And we all get those clients. We're going to talk about qualifying clients in another section because you don't want every client. That's the next thing that you want to think about. But he had a client that didn't pay him, was pretty savvy, and for whatever the reason, when he took the client to court, he actually lost. And so he actually even ended up paying the client's legal fees. So it went from, I think it was like 120,000 at that time, which would be a lot more now, to around almost 200,000. And I ran into him at one of the dinners that they normally have for contractors, and I remember he just seemed to be a beaten person. Like it was. I was upset to see him that way. And then a few months later, I heard he passed away of a heart attack. The stress, I think, just got to him. So you really, cash flow is a big deal in construction businesses. Take it seriously. And from what I gathered, the reason I'm saying that story with him, I thought it seemed to, for the size of projects that he typically did, that seemed to be a large amount of money to have outstanding for that one client, because he was a smaller contractor, and to have 100,000 owing from one client without having your schedule of values smaller and your payments smaller amounts. So if it could have been half that amount if he had been every 2 weeks, as an example, if he was doing that much work, that's less damage that way, right? But in the construction industry, you're always going to have certain amounts, and you have to be pretty proactive about collecting. People kind of wait. People don't always pay the bill as soon as it comes. You really appreciate the clients that do. And even government agencies, if you know it takes a longer period of time, at least you know you're going to get it. You just got to allow for it in your calculations for cash flow. That's not bad. At least you're eventually going to get it. As long as you've allocated for that and whatever cost of financing is in your costing, you're good. So that's what I really wanted to cover in this particular case. As I said, go back and check out the previous videos on financial statements, and that will give you a really good understanding of it. But go back to the beginning if you haven't seen some of the earlier ones, to how we formulate the business, having a mission, vision, core values, and a strategy, and how financial statements tie into this whole process. And in our next upcoming video, we're going to be looking at a development case, how leverage works in construction, and what is return on investment in running a construction business, and how you should think about your business, and the risks that are involved, as well as a little bit of luck doesn't hurt. So I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now, and don't forget to click the subscribe button. Bye for now.